The views and opinions of this program are those of the hosts, guests, and callers. There is substantial risk of loss in trading futures and options, which you should carefully consider prior to trading. Joining us now here on the program, let's get some perspective on what we're looking at in the grain and oilseed complex, not only the U.S. balance sheets, but looking at the world balance sheets and more. Wondering if these markets are maybe marking time until the end of the month reports and the tariff date of April 2nd and more. A lot for us to take a look at. Let's talk about it. Joining us now, Craig Turner with StoneX. Craig, it's good to hear from you again. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Thursday's trade, corn market was a little bit higher. Nice to see that. Old crop was kind of the leader there. Helped try to pull soybeans into the green too. I know wheat's been struggling a bit here this week. I guess 1,000-foot view this for us to start. What's your perception of this grain and oilseed trade? Are we marking time until those USDA reports, Craig?
Yeah, so you mentioned it earlier. It's a big factor out there. It's hard to see anyone putting a lot of money to work or making big bets either way till we see the planting intentions at the end of March here, and also the reaction of what's going to happen with these reciprocal tariffs. I did see Rubio. I think he was on Face the Nation over the weekend. Um, they're basically saying like they got to get these reciprocal tariffs in before they can start negotiating, right? It almost, I mean, if you read between the lines there. So I think the whole market's going to wait for that. If you take even a step back though, like once that all comes and goes, corn's getting a little tighter. The export report came out today. We're still about 150 million bushels ahead of USDA pace. It implies a 1.4 billion carryout for corn. And even on 94 million acres and a 181 yield, that only means we're 1.75 to 1.8 on the carryout. It doesn't take much on a summer weather scare to potentially have a rally, but there's no way we can have that until we get through this planting intentions and see what the market reacts to April 2nd. So, short-term lows are probably in for corn. Soybeans, we'll see. China really hasn't been, gangbusters on purchasing here. And the wheat market has been mixed. We've had a nice rally here just because it's so dry in the Midwest. It's dry in the Black Sea. It's dry in Eastern China. But you need that demand, right? Because when you get to March, April, and into May, wheat really is a show me market, meaning show me the demand. Otherwise, we're just going to wait for new crop to come in and, settle any kind of, price tightness.
Well, and I know not only the U.S., but you do a lot of work looking at the world balance sheets and more too. And you mentioned a few things, watching weather in the Black Sea, China, et cetera. I mean, when you look at the global picture for grains and oil seeds, what are some key things that stand out to you right now, Craig?
Yeah, for sure. So let's start with corn here. We are tight on the major exporters, and and we're tight here in the United States. So it's interesting. While there's you can make the case for adequate to maybe snug on the balance sheet, but it does not take a whole lot for us to rally. And I think if we did get a situation where you had a weather issue or we saw an increase in demand, we could see corn go up. Go back up to maybe the old highs that we saw earlier this year during the spring or summer weather market. What's interesting about soybeans is while the United States get tight, especially for 84 million acres, we're still going to have plenty of soybeans. It looks like in the rest of the world. I mean, really in South America, but there's something that we're just not talking about. South America is projected to have 15 million metric tons more soybeans year over year, and that's been the real big story here. But when you take a look at the USDA, they're expecting 20 million metric tons more demand year over year. So it doesn't get as loose on the balance sheets, I think, as some people realize. I think there's a lot more headline risk because we're basically in Cold War. It seems like trade war number 2 with China here because they're not budging, right? China's not going to budge, and it seems like the EU, Canada, and Mexico and the United States are all at least talking, right? Where after April 2nd, you can kind of see something happening, but not so much with China. And the wheat market, the wheat market is tight globally in major exporters. And if we do have tightness in the Black Sea and in Eastern China, and what's going on here in the United States, wheat has wheat has potential to run too, especially with the higher protein wheat. So things aren't all as dark and gloomy. I think that if we weren't doing the tariff war, and we'd probably be we'd probably be a lot higher here. But everything is just on hold here for the next 2 weeks.
How much does, when it comes to wheat, how much does U.S. weather concern you? We've been hearing the chatter about the problems in the southern plains, central plains with Kansas City wheat, the massive dust storms and more we've
Mhm.
seen. And then, I'm worried too about how dry it is in the Red River Valley of the North and the Dakotas, spring wheat into the Canadian prairies. I mean, how much does that concern you when it comes to this wheat market?
Very. Here's the thing: wheat's an interesting market because there's really, there's two markets that matter the most to the world. It's the wheat market and the rice market. It's the cheapest form of calories here globally. May not matter that much in the United States, but certainly in developing nations around the world, it's a big deal. And some developing nations are wheat-based diets and some are rice-based diets. Now, if you the whole purpose of the global grain trade is to have abundant amount of wheat, because if you don't have it, you can't eat the dirt. Like there's no downshifting, like there would be with corn and soybeans or something like that. So if the moral of the story here is, the rest of the world's tight, which means the United States is really the residual supplier of wheat right now. And if we should lose, a couple of bushels, if we're in the low 40s, or if we don't have the acres, or if the quality is poor and it's really just feed quality, right? We could have a serious problem in the wheat market. So it's one of those things where with wheat, you trade in a range until there's a real issue and then it blows up, right? And you've seen that in geopolitical issues, right, with Russia and Ukraine and Crimea and all that stuff, or with the Black Sea. Back in 2007, we had 2 drought years in a row in Australia, and in between there, we had production issues in the U.S. and South America, and that's when we saw hardwood wheat at $20 a bushel, which is crazy to think about, but it definitely happened. You go look at the chart. So that's the thing. Like if you have to, yeah, while the percentage is low, the percentage is there. Like there is an outside chance where you can get some serious issues. So it has to be monitored. And if we break above 650 on hard red winter wheat, you can all of a sudden, you can go up $1 or so.
I'm curious your thoughts too. I've noticed that new crop corn chart, December corn, has really struggled with like 454 futures
Mhm.
price right here, really for the last several sessions. Have you noticed that? What are you watching on the new crop corn chart, Greg?
Yeah. So, here's the thing with new crop. It's hard for corn to rally past that point if the whole market is waiting for 94 to 95 million acres, right?
Yeah.
So what you're more likely to see between now and planting intentions is old crop go higher. So when we had rumors today, and again, these are just rumors, that Brazil was buying a couple of cargoes from the United States out of the Gulf, what happened? May and July are up. Meanwhile, September and these really can't get a whole lot of traction. Right now, if we continue to see demand for corn, we'll just have to go into it. Will definitely be reflected in that old crop and in the spreads. For us to really get going on, for new crop corn, I would say July would need to be about 30 cents over December again. You get to about 30 cents over July D's, then all of a sudden it starts dragging December along with it. So I'd keep an eye on that spread. Because if we, at one point, when July got up to about what 520, earlier in December was in the 480s, 490 range, we're about 30, 40 cents over. You get a real, for example, if July were to rally to 550, you would think it would drag December up to 550, but you need more right now from July and old crop to get it higher.
Craig, what about the macro markets? Anything big you are paying attention to over there right now?
Yeah, for sure. So the Federal Reserve just came out and they were talking about how they may have 2 rate cuts this year. They talked about the economy. I think they just revised GDP just a little bit lower and they inched up the inflation number. When it comes to the macro markets, there's a lot of they're trying to make more efficiencies in the government, get rid of waste and fraud. So over the long term, all those things sound supportive of growth. In the short term, though, it's the tariffs are going to have definitely an impact here. So, the stock market's been down about 10%. A 10% correction in the stock market is typically healthy. A 20% correction is bear market territory, as would any kind of negative GDP. That doesn't look like it's in the cards right now. And then the dollar's getting weaker, right? So if the U.S. is going to have 2 rate cuts, that should have a little bit of a weaker dollar, should help exports a little bit. So on the macro themes, it's we'll see how it goes. It looks like it's steady. You're not going to be gangbusters with growth, but it is nice to see inflation at 3% or lower. And I think that's going to allow the Fed to have more of a stabilization on the policies.
Craig, any final thoughts you would have for folks here today? Anything else you'd mention or reiterate as we close it out?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's more potential in the upside for corn than people realize, or that at least has been out there. I mean, if we're 94 million acres, and let's say we're 178 or a 177 yield, or the market even just believes that's possible because you get a vanilla summer scare, rather, all of a sudden we are back to 1.5 billion. We are at 10% stock to usage. Like, we may have to price ration not just old crop, but new crop. I'll say one other thing too. You can make the case wheat or soybeans can kind of weigh corn down, because it's very difficult for one commodity to go higher without a shortage in another one. And if you do get a drought that develops in the Western belt, and all of a sudden we're talking about 83 to 84 million acres soybeans, and the yield's closer to 50, U.S. soybeans does get tight, like 200 million carryout or less tight. And what's interesting about that is now corn, you're not just price rationing old crop. Now corn and soybeans are actually fighting for new crop acres, and that's how you can get a bigger rally, in the market. So it's interesting. It's maybe the odds are lower, right? But it's not far fetched, and I wouldn't get too bearish on corn and soybeans just yet.
Craig, if folks want to reach out to you, have a conversation, I know they can find you easily online. How can folks reach you?
Yeah, you can Google Craig Turner at StoneX. You'll get all my contact info in there, or you can just give me a call at 312-706-7610.
Craig Turner with StoneX. Always appreciate the time. Thanks for joining us here on the show today. Have a good one. We'll talk to you again soon.
All right, thanks very much.
Make sure to subscribe to the Market Talk YouTube channel. You can watch our latest interviews with top market analysts in the country, find bonus content, and much more. It's easy. Just go to youtube.com/@MarketTalkAg and hit the subscribe button. Or you can search for Market Talk Ag on YouTube.